Well, we're off to see something fun.
Yeah.
The Golden Spike.
Oh, the Golden
The
Spike.
Golden Spike. One of the questions is there only one of those? Well, kind of.
Yes.
And kind of not.
Yes.
So that's part of the question that we're going to be addressing. If you've been following along, you know that the 150th anniversary of the driving of the Golden Spike is coming up here in Salt Lake City on May 10th. 2019, which is this year, if you're watching it on time. If you're watching it 2 years from now, of course, this is all history. Einstein explained it. There's time and space.
Travel,
and anyway,
relativity.
If you're watching the new version of this that we're just putting up, that's May coming right up.
Yes.
And the big thing is that the big locomotive, the big boy, is coming to Salt Lake as part of the 150th anniversary of the driving of said Golden Spike. Well, the Golden Spike has already arrived.
Wow.
It's got to get ready for the party, you know, it's got to get everything organized. Anyway, they've put together a show at the University of Utah of old photographs and artifacts. It came here from Omaha. It's been on display in Omaha, where the Union Pacific started building the Union Pacific, and it has arrived here in Salt Lake, where it will be residing through May 10th and then on to Sacramento. So we're going to go check that out. The actual Golden Spike and its cousins and twins and stuff, and all of the artifacts that they've put together for the 150th anniversary of the Pacific Railroad. So our adventure is taking us here to the University of Utah.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
My old alma mater.
That's right. Everybody's alma mater. Go Utes, right?
Go Utes. Well, I also had the privilege of teaching here for like 14 years.
Nice.
So that was really neat. Anyway, this is the Museum of Fine Arts at the University of Utah, which is a really good museum of fine arts. They have the usual collection of all kinds of wonderful things. And they get traveling shows through here all the time. And right now, the traveling show is a series of railroad photographs.
Oh, boy.
And railroad artifacts.
Nice.
From the Transcontinental Railroad.
Even better.
Because of the upcoming 150th anniversary of the driving of the Golden Spike. So it looks a little out of place, but at the end of the hall is a photograph of an old wood trestle.
Oh, look at that.
Isn't that beautiful? On close inspection, that gigantic trestle is the trestle that was built up at Promontory. It's a temporary trestle.
It looks temporary. My goodness. Talk about rickety.
Really rickety. One neat thing about seeing it in a huge reproduction like this is you can see certain details. Now, the description of the photo says it's locomotive number 2. Well, there was no locomotive number 2, but you can clearly see in this huge blow-up of the picture, it's our good friend, the 119, which is one of the 2 locomotives that met pilot to pilot as they drove the Golden Spikes. In fact, 119 was the first locomotive across the gap.
Neat. So why did they build a temporary trestle?
Well, this was the Union Pacific building this, and Congress had decreed that they would give all of this track to the Central Pacific as soon as the Spike was driven. Well, they weren't very motivated to do a really good job.
Oh.
And so they just built a bunch of trashy work up here. Look, the trestle is just sitting on the ground. It's made with pilings, but in a huge picture like this, you can see they're not even really driven into the ground. They're just sort of standing on the surface of the ground. That is some flimsy construction.
No kidding.
But the CP never even used it. They just immediately tore it down and put in a fill instead. So this really cool show they're calling the Race to Promontory. And it started off in Omaha a few months ago. And after being on display in Omaha, it traveled here to Salt Lake City. And then after the reenactment on May 10th, the whole thing's moving on to Sacramento.
They've sure done a great job of putting this show together.
First class.
No kidding.
The show principally consists of 150 photographs by 3 different photographers. Andrew Russell, who worked for the Union Pacific, Alfred Hart, and a Utah photographer, Charles Savage, who's best known for his photographs of early Salt Lake City. One thing that's really interesting here is some of these prints are the only known copies of these photographs. They've never been duplicated, and there are no negatives.
This looks like it might be the CP.
Yeah, this is Central Pacific, and you can tell because the ties are square. Union Pacific used just logs, hand-hewed logs, but on the CP side of the gap, they're really nicely trimmed square ties. Both of these railroads had hired photographers. In fact, the Union Pacific has always had a company photographer running around taking pictures of everything. And in fact, they still do. We get those calendars every year.
That's right.
They just always have staff photographers photographing everything. And so you get these really beautiful photographs off of the Union Pacific because they just take photographs of everything, and they always have. Look at that interesting structure on the top of the tender.
That's not a doghouse.
That's not a doghouse. If you notice, the tops of all of the work cars are covered with little structures and tents. The guys lived up there.
I would think so, yeah.
And Union Pacific was also really well known for these giant windmills that they put up all the way across the plains. Lots of wind out on the plains. Nowadays, we know that they were ahead of their time. A major part of the show are the stereographs that were photographed by Alfred S. Hart. Hart was a California photographer who just loved working in stereographs, these great 3D pictures that were really, really popular at the time. All kinds of people had stereo viewers in their parlor, and they were always looking for some kind of stereo images to look at. So in 1866, the Central Pacific made him the official photographer of the Central Pacific, and he traveled with the construction as it headed east out of Sacramento, documenting the event as he went with his stereoscopic camera. The railroad chose 364 of his stereo images to publish as these cards. They look sort of like a postcard, but they're meant to be viewed in your stereoscopic viewer. So these things turn up all over the place, even on eBay.
Yes.
I think we should keep our eye out. This would be fun to put together a collection of these if we can start to find a few.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I think it's amazing how these have survived even after 150 years.
And a lot of them are in great shape. Now here's a place we're very familiar with, Donner Lake.
Exactly.
We came up here and explored the old grade. We've got a show up on that. But that was really, really fun. We've got friends up here, too. They live here.
That's right.
They're buried under like 30 feet of snow right now, so that's not so good. But we even walked the summit tunnel.
We did. I was a little bit scared to walk back in there, but it stands the test of time.
Walking through it, it's much more 3D than seeing a stereo slide. And these are the snow sheds that they build up there. There's still snow sheds up there. They're not used anymore, and the ones that are there are more modern than the ones they're building here in the photographs. They were replaced, of course, over the years. But it's amazing that all of the snow sheds are still up there. They're just a more modern version, and no track in them, or we wouldn't go anywhere near them.
This is one of the neatest railroad grades that we've ever walked on, right by the freeway with easy access.
Yeah, it has its own off-ramp.
That's right.
I want to take a drone up there. Oh, look! Deeth! Deeth in Star Valley.
Oh, there it is.
Deeth Star. You don't suppose that's where Lucas got the idea.
Could be.
It might be. Oh, and Corinne.
Corinne, oh my, look at that.
Almost at where they drove the Golden Spike, and we've covered a model railroad at Corinne.
That's right.
That's a really good model railroad up there at Corinne. But that's what it looked like back then. And here we see one of the most famous photographs in American history.
Exactly.
The Wedding of the Rails by Alfred Russell. Alfred Joseph Russell. At the very center of the image, you can see Samuel S. Montague on the left, who is with the Central Pacific Railroad, shaking hands with Grenville M. Dodge of the Union Pacific Railroad on our right. The image was taken on a glass plate with a really, really long exposure, and the glass plate was 8 by 10 inches.
Wow.
So there's actually a ton of detail here. It's such a great cross-section of humanity, workers and businessmen together. I think they understood that their phases were going to be preserved for all time here.
It's too bad some of them moved.
Yep. I've always wondered about these 3 bottles, and when you zoom right in, it's 2 bottles of beer and a bottle of California champagne.
Oh.
It represents the East and the West coming together.
I see.
Some of these guys are wearing guns. We kind of think of that in Old Western terms, but most of them are not. Most of them are really finely dressed, or they're just wearing their normal work clothes, because for them it's sort of a normal work day.
That's true.
A very special work day.
A very special work day.
But these are just the guys who built this without the Chinese.
Ah.
They wouldn't let the Chinese be in the photograph or even attend the event. That's just really bad. Well, these are some amazing photographs.
No kidding.
But that's not all they've got here. A lot of what they brought are artifacts.
Oh, look at this.
This is Grenville M. Dodge's transit.
Oh.
On the day that he was hired to build the Union Pacific, he was hired to be the contractor for that. He got permission from the Army to take leave of absence because he was a general.
Ah.
And he grabbed up his transit and headed out on the Overland Trail and started surveying. So this is his actual transit and measuring chain. He started measuring in 100-mile increments and putting these into these beautifully bound folios, and they have those here too. Each folio contains 100 miles of survey, and he did about 400 miles of survey with this transit.
Wow.
The Union Pacific, of course, laid a lot more track than the Central Pacific did. This is the walking stick of L.M. Bennett, and it was made from the same laurelwood tree that the final tie was made from. West Evans, the tie contractor for the Central Pacific Railroad, had San Francisco billiard table companies Strahl and Hughes build a laurelwood tie to use as the final tie. It was pre-drilled for the spikes so that they would just drop in place. It also had this beautiful pure silver plaque on it, which says the last tie laid on completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, May 1869. It also listed the name of the manufacturer, the officers of the Central Pacific, and the donors that paid for it. And this really neat coin. It's a $2.50 coin, a quarter eagle they called them. James Harris and his friend, spectators at the event, placed coins on the rail just before the 119 crossed the finished gap. And it was slightly smushed by the 119. Well, it survives after all these years. The other coin, unfortunately, lost to history.
I think it's neat to think that that was smashed by the 119.
Yeah, the actual 119, not the reproduction that's there now. After David Hughes had the final spike constructed, they removed the casting sprue from that, and from that chunk of gold, he had fashioned 7 of these watch fobs in the shape of small gold spikes. He principally gave these to his relatives. One of these is on display at the Golden Spike National Historic Site. They also made some jewelry from the gold. Look at this beautiful ring.
Oh, that's wonderful.
There were 4 of these made, and apparently a locket, because the California State Railroad Museum has now found a locket. And the crown jewels of railroading in America.
There they are.
There they are. The final spikes, including the Golden Spike,
the final spike that completed the Transcontinental Railroad. So originally there were 4 of these spikes for the 4 spikes that would go into the laurel tie, all made of different kinds of precious metal and prepared by different groups to be presented at the event. A lot of people don't know. They think there was just the golden spike.
That's what I was taught in school.
Yeah, but there were 4 ceremonial spikes. It's just that this one was the final spike. Normally, it's on display at Stanford University. This is the spike that was presented by the Arizona Territory. It's a composite made from layering silver on top of a normal iron spike. The engraving says, "Ribbed with iron, clad in silver, crowned with gold, Arizona presents her offering to the enterprise that has banded the continent and dictated a pathway to commerce." The top of the spike is made from gold and says, "Presented by Governor Suttard."
Look at that beautiful engraving.
Nevada's spike is made from Comstock silver, and it was forged rather than cast. The spike was hammered into shape by the Dowling blacksmith shop. As a forged spike, it was really rather rough, and it just had an assay stamp on it, no engraving. All of this polishing and engraving was added after the ceremony. And the beautiful final spike, the golden spike, made out of 14 ounces of 17-karat gold. A guy named David Hughes, a friend of Leland Stanford, had it made by the Garrett Foundry of San Francisco. He thought it would gain attention for the completion of the railroad, which he was very disappointed in. He thought nobody was really paying attention to this momentous event that was about to happen, and he wanted to do something that would gain public attention and garner enthusiasm for the completion of this great undertaking, the Pacific Railroad. Well, it worked. It got the public's attention, and, well, that got other people to build spikes as well. Another gold spike was built by Frederick Marriott of the San Francisco Newsletter. Unfortunately, this one has vanished.
Oh, no.
The assumption is it was taken back to the newspaper and was lost in the 1906 earthquake and fire, which destroyed the laurel tie as well.
Oh, no.
It was inscribed, "With this spike, the San Francisco Newsletter offers its homage to the great work which has joined the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans." And yet another gold spike, this one an exact duplicate of the David Hughes spike. It seems that after David Hughes gave all of these spikes and jewelry away to family and dignitaries, I guess he sort of regretted not keeping anything for himself. So once again, he had the Garrett Foundry in San Francisco make another spike, an exact duplicate of the first one. This spike is on display at the California State Railroad Museum, right below the famous painting of the Driving of the Golden Spike by Thomas Hill.
That's cool.
And we've seen that.
We have.
It's a beautiful museum. And now they've acquired that found locket, also made from the sprue gold, and I think we need to go see it.
We do.
As soon as the May 10th event is over, let's go.
Let's head out.
Well, there it is, the real golden spike. There's sure a lot of misinformation about it.
Yeah, no kidding. I know I've been told, some false statements about it too.
Everyone claims to have the real one.
Exactly.
There's the real one.
There's the real one.
Right there. But the big thing is the big boy.
Yes.
On the actual 150th anniversary, Union Pacific is sending the newly restored 4014 Big Boy, the world's largest steam locomotive, which is being rebuilt as we speak. They're just putting the finishing touches on it. and it will be arriving somewhere around May 6th, May 7th. They haven't specified a date yet. On May 10th, it's actually going to be displayed right here. We shot this footage in Ogden, and it will be on display on May 10th in Ogden, Utah, which is about as close as they can get it to Promontory. This thing is really neat, and we've visited a few times.
We have.
We've been out to Cheyenne, where they're restoring it to the roundhouse there, just to check out work on it. It's really, really coming along, and it's almost done. Well, the spike is actually a work of art.
And I finally get to see it.
Yeah, we've seen many a reproduction, but there's the real spike right there.
Awesome.
It's going to be traveling up to the state capitol building during the 150th anniversary. So if you're coming to the anniversary celebration, make sure you visit the spikes, which will be on display at the state capitol building.
Well, that's pretty neat.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
A lot of history behind those spikes, and
No
especially that
kidding.
one spike.
No kidding.
But all those other spikes that have kind of been cloned, and the whole way that went to generate 4 spikes for the actual event, plus clones of that spike.
Right.
And all kinds of things.
Wow.
When we were kids, we were told that the golden spike was residing in the Utah State Capitol building.
That's where I thought I saw it.
And we went up there and we would see it, and they would tell us that it was the golden
spike.
And we found it. They've moved
Yes.
it from the State Capitol building, and they've put it in the Daughters of Utah Pioneers Museum, the DUP Museum, which is at the Capitol. It's across the street.
Across the street.
And no, it's just a reproduction. But back then, we were always told that
was the golden spike. That was
spike,
it.
and
Yeah.
everybody believed that, and that was the legend around town.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the real spike was at Stanford University.
Yes.
And this was just one of the many reproductions.
Yes.
But they're at the Utah State Capitol building. So that's pretty cool.
Really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we found a bunch of other things in conjunction with all of this, and we're going to kind of throw those up on some other days.
Right.
Because there's all kinds of other things going on
No
in
kidding.
conjunction with this golden spike thing and 150th. So if you're going to be coming to that, we want to show you a bunch of things you want to check out while you're in Salt Lake, because there's little events popping up all over the place.
Right. Almost like a scavenger hunt.
And neat things to see in conjunction with the 150th. So we'll be
Yeah,
putting those
man.
up on a Friday. We've got these new Friday shows called Look What We Found.
Mm-hmm.
Look What We Found. So we're going to stick some stuff up on Look What We Found in conjunction with this. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop on over to the channel, and you can binge watch and tell your friends about it and share and all of those
Absolutely.
wonderful things.
Yes.
Tell your boss at work. And okay,
was your boss.
that was my boss at work. Somebody's got an
I
Ugo
guess we're
horn.
gonna get back to work.
Where was I? Oh, to subscribe. Go over to the channel and to subscribe. And if you hear an Ugo horn, that'll remind
his
you.
boss.
Does the name Pavlov ring a bell? Anyway, the easy way to get to the channel and become a subscriber. Are you cracking up over there? Shit, we've lost her. The way to get to the channel and subscribe is with the blue button. Are you ready for the blue button? Can you do the blue button? Or do you need to breathe first? Okay, you ready? Here it comes. Blue button makes you a subscriber. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet, and we hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again in a few days with a Tuesday show. See you then. Bye-bye.